Hello, welcome to this session. We are presenting on LGBTQ inclusive curriculum from a youth perspective. This session is brought to you by the It Gets Better Project and Education Council, and we are so excited to be here at South by Southwest EDU. My name is Justin Tyndall. I use he, they pronouns. I'm the Director of Education and Global Programming at the It Gets Better Project, and I'm here with three of my friends for this wonderful discussion. And I will allow Sean to start off with introducing himself as well.
Hey y'all, my name is Sean Worley. I'm with Education Council. I'm a Senior Policy Associate with the team. Happy to be here with you all and happy to have this conversation.
Thanks, Sean. Uma.
Hi everyone, I'm Uma. I use she, her pronouns, and I am one of the youth voices for the It Gets Better Project, class of 2021.
And Zach.
Hi, my name is Zach Hong. I use he, him pronouns, and like Uma, I am also part of the Youth Voices.
Thank you. I'm so excited that you're all here with me today because, of course, we get to talk about a very important subject, which is inclusive curriculum. But first, I want to kind of paint a picture together with Sean of what we mean by inclusive curriculum and how it fits into the scope of what are considered inclusive schools. So our friends over at GLSEN, which is another LGBTQ plus nonprofit, through their research, they have found that there are 4 specific school-based resources that are related to safer and more inclusive school climates for all students. The first is supportive educators. The second is LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. The third is inclusive and supportive policies. And the fourth is supportive student clubs, such as Genders and Sexuality Alliances, GSAs, or formerly known as Gay-Straight Alliances. All 4 of these pillars are extremely important, again, to helping build inclusive school climates. But we're here today specifically to talk about the one that I mentioned earlier, LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. And of course, what do we mean by LGBTQ inclusive curriculum? Well, this is curriculum that regularly highlights LGBTQ plus people, history, and culture in a positive way. It's one that respectfully acknowledges what LGBTQ plus communities contribute to the world. And it's one that values diversity and recognizes intersectional identities and experiences. Why is this curriculum, this type of curriculum, this inclusive curriculum so important? Well, again, our friends over at GLSEN have found through their research that LGBTQ students who attend schools with curriculum that is inclusive of LGBTQ people, history, and events experience a better school climate and improved academic outcomes. So that is what we mean by inclusive schools. That's what we mean by inclusive curriculum. And Sean's going to hop in and tell us a little bit more about what this looks like through a national landscape.
Thanks, Justin. As Justin said, it's so important that LGBTQ students of color, students with disabilities, students from immigrant or Native backgrounds, just really students that have not seen themselves in what they're learning. It's critical that they do see themselves in what they're learning, but unfortunately, far too many of them live in states that require curriculum to be inclusive of their identities, including their intersectional identities. As of this year, only 5 states, California, Colorado, Illinois, New Jersey, and Oregon, have laws that require the state to develop and adopt inclusive social studies and history curriculum materials. Now, these laws vary in the specific language and the requirements, but really the intent is pretty similar across the board. Each one of those states wants to ensure that their schools use materials that teach about and affirm the contributions of LGBTQ people, which is really important for student identity development and just students really being engaged with what they're learning. Of course, and just to make a note here that these laws are not meant to be exclusive of other identities. In fact, they often include requirements that the curriculum also teach about and affirm the contributions of people of color, people from Native and First Nation communities, and people with disabilities, just to name a few. For today, though, we're choosing to focus on the requirements related to LGBTQ people because we want to be clear, but we want to be clear and state that an inclusive curriculum that includes multiple identities and communities is powerful for all students, and that's the ideal that we're really striving for. But even though there's the 5 states that have those affirming and requirements to have an inclusive curriculum, unfortunately, there are still some states that have taken action to explicitly restrict the teaching about LGBTQ people and our history. These laws are often referred to as no promo homo laws, essentially laws that prevent the promotion of LGBTQ history or related discussions happening in the classroom. 6 states, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Texas, have some version of a no promo homo law still in effect. Now, most of these laws are written with very vague and broad language about what can be taught in sexual health courses, which was the intention of those laws. But because the laws lack such detail, they often prevent teachers from including LGBTQ history in their social studies or history classes. And in some places, they even prevent the creation of GSAs, which, as Justin noted earlier, is one of the pillars to having an inclusive environment for LGBTQ students. Now, noting that there are the 5 that have done some great work to affirm the identities of students with their curriculum, and the 6 that have the no promo homo laws still in the books. For the remaining 39 states in the country, they don't have really any sort of law on the books related to curriculum, but within those districts, or even some states have taken action throughout the whole state. They've taken it upon themselves to adopt some type of inclusive curricular standard for their schools, which is great, and we love to see that. But we're really looking forward to the day that every state in the country has an inclusive curriculum law so that every student can see themselves in what they're learning. And to get there, we're really hoping to, and we're committed as partners in this work, is that we're committed to building coalitions of students, of educators, activists, community leaders, teachers, really the variety of stakeholders that should be involved in these conversations and should be really elevating the authentic voices of why an inclusive curriculum matters in the classroom. And we're hoping to get more into that and hear from some of those voices today. So Justin, I'll take it back to you.
Thank you, Sean. Obviously, for those of you that are tuning in, this conversation is really important. I grew up in Arizona, a state with no explicit inclusive mandate or exclusion mandate, but I worked as a teacher. I taught 4th grade in Texas, where there is a no promo homo law on the books. But now I live and work in California, where there is specifically a mandate to include LGBTQ curriculum in public curriculum. And so our experiences from state to state are going to be so different. But it's good for us to come together, understand these different experiences, and find out what roles we can play. And again, what Sean was talking to, in building a nationwide coalition to one day see inclusive mandates in every state. So that's why I brought Uma and Zach here today, my young friends, who they themselves are currently high school students, because we want to have a conversation a little bit about inclusive mandates, again, and about the movement to pass them in every state in the nation. So I'm actually going to start with a question for you, Uma. I would love to get your perspective on what role do you think students can or should play in this movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the really crucial thing to recognize is that anything that students are going to be learning from needs to be geared towards students, and therefore needs to include students in the process of making it. We make the best and most engaging and most representative curriculum when we're involving the people it's planned to represent. And so when I was living in Maryland, I focused a lot of my work there in LGBTQ+ advocacy and ensuring that students had a voice in the decisions being made, both about curriculum and specifically LGBTQ+ studies curriculum. So I and a coalition of students worked to create the US's first standardized LGBTQ+ studies course for high schoolers. And one of the most essential aspects of that process was ensuring that while writing such a curriculum and while advocating such a curriculum, there was a 1-to-1 ratio of both teachers on board and experts on board and students on board writing. Students have a lot of knowledge that many adults don't have about LGBTQ plus issues, especially about diverse LGBTQ plus issues that might be more representative of their background. And so I think it's really essential that we recognize that students are equally qualified to write curriculum as many experts and as many teachers, because of the knowledge they themselves have accrued and of the education that they've done for themselves, because the education system has failed to do it. And so a lot of us have a lot of knowledge that we've independently pursued about LGBTQ plus experiences. And so I think students can both be really empowered advocates for curriculum inclusion and can also be really crucial in the process of writing curriculums themselves, and can have a lot of contributions in terms of representing the various intersections of their identities and also the intersections found in their community.
For sure. Fantastic answer. And again, congratulations on what you were able to accomplish in Maryland and what is happening there for students. Fantastic job. You should be extremely, extremely proud.
Thank you.
Sean, I'll pass off the next question to you.
Yeah, I just want to first note, when I was talking earlier about within those 39 states with outlaws, that some districts are taking things into their own hands. But let me just highlight that some students are taking things into their own hands, which is even better, in my opinion, than some of the adults leading in these spaces. So thank you, Uma. Zach, I would love to turn to you. From your perspective as a student, what do you think is the role, or what do you think educators should be doing to support this work and to better affirm LGBTQ youth in their classrooms?
Right. That's a really great question. And I'll start with, I think educators need to listen to people from their lived experience. And I think educators do a great job at that. And so I want to take a moment to highlight and uplift something that I've heard from a non-binary educator who is focusing this space about how can we as educators be more inclusive and more impactful with our students. And something as simple as on the get to know you form that you send home, it's what is your name, but then also add what is your pronouns? What is the pronouns that you would like me to use with your parents? What is the pronouns you'd like me to use with other staff? And then what is the pronouns you'd like me to use with other students? Because we have to recognize that each student is at a different step in their own journey, and that we can't apply a one-size-fits-all solution. So really, I think the work of the educator is crucial, because there can be curriculum that they can use, but it is oftentimes the role of the educator to reflect based on what they're hearing from their class, what they're hearing from their students, and then adapt and change to make sure that they're meeting the mark that their students expect them to meet. So it's, I think, the small changes that educators can do just to their daily routines. Something as simple as stopping to say, "Hey guys, let's do this," and recognizing that guys can be, for a lot of people, exclusionary, and instead, saying, "Hey, the school's mascot," or "Hey, everybody," or just ditching the gendered terms altogether that can feel incredibly exclusionary.
I appreciate that so much, Zach. Thinking back to my time in the classroom, and just knowing the power of seeing students and hearing students for who they are and who they want to be seen and heard as, I think is so powerful. And I'm a fan of using y'all when it comes to non-gender based terminology, so I appreciate you calling that out. Justin, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, and I want to say I appreciate that so much as well. As an adult, right? I use he, they pronouns, and for some people that could be very confusing. But I grew up, obviously, in a home and a culture that used he, him pronouns to refer to me. I still will use those pronouns when I'm at home and when I'm with my family. It matches. It's what works there. But more and more of my colleagues and the people that I work with have recognized how I don't always identify in that space. And so they're using more and more they, them pronouns when they refer to me. And it feels so affirming. It feels so tangibly real that someone can see that, sure, I may be someone with my family, but I am another person with colleagues and friends, and I'm both. And so I really appreciate that. Knowing that can be offered to students is such an incredible support. So thank you, Zach, for bringing that up. Uma, back at you. As we're talking about this, we brought up diversity earlier, and Sean did a great point in talking about that usually these inclusive mandates don't just focus on LGBTQ inclusion. They recognize that our identities can be multifaceted and intersectional. How do you think we can ensure that this work and this movement is always inclusive of other identities and the work specifically of communities of color to expand culturally relevant and affirming curriculum?
I think, once again, it comes back down to who is sitting and writing these courses. In the same way that students have a lot to contribute, I think diverse student coalitions have even more to contribute, that they can best represent themselves and best explain the importance of their identity and best include their identity in these curriculums. One of the first things that happened when I was working on writing LGBTQ+ studies curriculums was deciding whether or not they should be focused on American history, and that would be something that was most represented to students, or more on global history, and the idea of LGBTQ+ identities as global. And I think, to me, as someone who's second-generation American, Indian American, one of the things that was really important was that it was global, because the American LGBTQ+ experience is not the history of my LGBTQ+ ancestors. It's far from it. I'm much more defined by a long history of both religious inclusion and a lot of colonial subjugation in India that was related to LGBTQ+ identity and experiences. And I think that's the case for a lot of students who are first and second generation American, that the idea of American history, while important to them and while necessary with things like Stonewall, with things like the AIDS movement in the 1980s in the US, might not be representative of their individual LGBTQ+ history. And so there's a lot of importance in ensuring that we have both personal understanding of kind of ourselves and our relation to the LGBTQ+ past. And I think we can best do that when we're representing ourselves and when we're able to also play a stake and have importance within writing curriculum. I also think one of the really important things is that when we're working to make sure curriculums are inclusive, we don't view them in a binary, and that we include them in other types of education. I think too often we have like one day dedicated to LGBTQ+ history in a history class or in an English class. And then you have one day maybe during February for Black history. And we view it as this kind of piece by piece thing. It needs to be something fluid and incorporated into classrooms and modules. That we recognize that LGBTQ+ history and the history of people of color and the history of people with disabilities is part of US history, or part of global history, or part of literature, and that these contributions are also fluid and dynamic and are something that's comprehensive.
Right, and if I might add there real quick, I think, we made some great points, but we also need to look at, overlapping identities, right? And especially overlapping identities of oppression. And so when we talk about inclusive curriculum, reading a book with, the trope gay best friend, a cis gay white male, is not going to be very representative of the LGBTQ+ community, right? We need to make sure we have those diverse perspectives. Something my personal school district is doing with Black History Month is, Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action. And one of the days, which we've developed our own curriculum for educators to use, is talking about the importance of Black, transgender, and non-binary people and their role in, the civil rights movement and in the queer rights movement. So I think we need to look at that and really look deeper into our own, oftentimes we find ourselves with unconscious biases, and we need to look deeper into ourselves and figure out, why are we okay with a cisgendered white gay male, but have more difficult time looking at a person of color who's non-binary, right? Why are we more accepting as a society to one and not the other? And so that's why when we talk about the inclusive work, it's not just inclusive as, yes, we have now one gay character. That's nowhere near inclusive. And to talk about further what Uma said, I really think that's a huge point, is we need to make sure that we're learning about this year round, right? Where we say, like, for example, February is Black History Month. Why is it not every month? Why don't we learn every month about the importance of the African-American community and have that just baked into the rest of the curriculum that we learn? I think that applies to the LGBTQ+ inclusivity, right? This should be a year-round activity. It shouldn't be do it a few days and then we drop it. Growing up and going through my education, I learned about an LGBTQ issue twice, and it was Stonewall. Once in my US history class and once in my world history class. And they were both about 5-minute conversations. And so I'm not even starting to learn about, I had to learn about it on my own. And I don't think we should put that burden on students, especially who are, learning about themselves and figuring out who they are as people. We shouldn't put that burden on them and have them be able to learn about themselves in school.
That's so many great points from both of you. Thank you so much. I think I think you're representing a flaw in what we're representing here as inclusive curriculum, right? So far, these inclusive curriculum mandates in these 5 states mostly pertain to just history and social studies curriculums, right? But why is talking about our community or talking about some of our trailblazers, our scientists and our artists and our mathematicians, why is that confined to only a history or social studies class when there's so many other subjects in which we could also be reflected as in the curriculum and in those stories? That is so important. And to one of the other points you made, Zach, I believe it was in one of the 5 states as well that there was some curriculum that was trying to be passed, and people were saying, "Oh, look, this curriculum it contains some queer people in there," and it was a few brief mentions of some queer celebrities, all of them who were white. And although yes, there are certainly individuals that we need to celebrate and that we can celebrate for their achievements, a single a white community member is not representative of the whole, is not representative of everybody in that community. And so it's so much more than just including the name of a person on one assignment, one day of the year. It's really about incorporating our identities and our communities every day in every aspect of the curriculum where it's possible to do so. Sean, the last question is yours.
Yeah. I also just want to know, so much of what you both brought up resonates with me, particularly thinking about even the intersectionality within the LGBTQ community, and recognizing the fact that as a white cisgender gay man, I have such a narrow experience of the LGBTQ experience. And so thinking about how then the curriculum really does have to be brought in so much further beyond just what my experience may have been or people that look like me. With that, Zach, would love for you to think, and I know we're coming up on time here, but we have been in this remote world for quite some time, and we may not go back to fully in person for everyone for a while. So thinking about remote learning, what opportunities, what challenges do you think can be afforded with inclusive curriculum?
Right, and so I'll try to address this super quick, but we have, as you can see on this video, next to all of our names, we listed our pronouns. It's a simple step that's a great step for our educators to be able to see that and be able to know how to refer to us. And so, however, the issue is with certain programs that isn't an option, right? With a lot of school-based programs like Google Meet, and I know certain levels of Zoom has it where that isn't really possible because of the administrative locks that the school system has for security reasons. Mm-hmm. So it's advocating for those changes so that students can have their pronouns next to their name, right? Have it next to their name on a discussion board so that students, the very minimal basic steps so that students can feel accepted and reflective of, who they are.
I appreciate it. And anything that could be simple and should be simple, I think is some of the things that should be easily done, and there really shouldn't be that many issues with that. So thank you for raising that, Zach. I think that's a great suggestion. Justin, I think you're going to be closing us out.
Yes. Again, thank you, everyone, all 3 of you, for being here with me. This has been such a great experience, but I don't want it to stop here. As we mentioned several times, we're not just talking about inclusive mandates, we're talking about an inclusive movement, and we want to keep the conversation going. So if you are interested in participating and continuing that conversation, this link that is going to pop up here is to a short 2-minute survey just to provide maybe your contact info and how you might like to get involved in carrying this conversation forward. I also want to offer these next few links if you want to have access to this presentation, both in a Google Slides format as well as in a PDF. And an expanded version of this presentation, because of course this is only a 25-minute version. So please, if you're interested in carrying this conversation forward, click one of those links, join us. We're so excited to include more people in the movement. And again, thank you, Uma, Sean, and Zach, for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Justin. Bye, Uma. Bye, Zach.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.